Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain. I want to welcome you to this presentation on how to expand margin and reduce supply chain cost with digital manufacturing. One quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, supply chain leaders are under more pressure than ever to lower costs, expand margins, and balance growth and profitability, all while facing skilled labor shortages and rising materials and logistics costs. So today, you're going to hear from two experts at the forefront of AI, manufacturing technology, and global supply chain strategy. They'll discuss how digital manufacturing delivers quantifiable economic impact and helps supply chain leaders to achieve higher revenue through faster time to market, increased product margins through lower bill of material costs, and reduced held inventory costs. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Dr. Stephen Timme is the founder and president of Finlistics. Prior to founding Finlistics, Stephen was a professor of finance at Emory University and Georgia State University, and an adjunct professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Dave Evans is CEO and co-founder of Fiftive, a global manufacturing company. Dave is a regular contributor to Fast Company and Forbes, and prior to Fiftive, was the first hire at Ford's Silicon Valley Innovation Lab. With that, I want to start us off with Dave. Dave, take us into the beginning of the presentation and let's get going.
Thanks so much for having me, Bob. Super excited to be here and really excited to talk about this topic. We were hoping to have Rebecca with us from Aptronics, their head of supply chain, but we'll make do here, and I'll do my best. So let's get started. So before we get in, I want to just tell you a little bit about Fiftive and what we do. Our vision is how do we enable innovators to create? And so we believe that fundamentally all people are creative at their core. But one of the things that stops this creation from getting to market is really supply chain. And we've seen this more so in the most recent years, the last 4 or 5 years. And so our mission as a company is how do we simplify sourcing for custom manufacturing? And we do this by focusing specifically on custom mechanicals. We have a 3P strategy where we focus on building our platform. We've been in business for over 10 years. We've raised over $200 million, and we've built a best-in-class technology platform to access this global supply chain. What you get when you work with Fiftive is that you get real people, boots on the ground in 4 different countries: Mexico, India, China, and the US. So you are getting a ready-made Fortune 500 supply chain that you get to plug directly into. We operate in an asset zero model, meaning we don't own the factories. What we do is we partner with these best factories all over the world to help build a supply chain that's customized for you. And by leveraging this technology plus people and boots on the ground, we really give you this Fortune 500 supply chain in a box, which we call digital manufacturing. And so we're here to talk a lot about the benefits today, and super excited, Bob, for you to have us. Oh, you're on mute there, Bob.
Sorry.
No worries.
Oh, back on mute, Bob.
No, yeah. I'm back. Okay, got it. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's start off with getting a sense of audience priorities, and we're going to pose a poll here and ask the audience to answer this particular question. You have 3 choices. Which area of financial performance are you most focused on improving over the next 12 months? Accelerating revenue growth, expanding profit margin, or improving asset utilization? Please take a moment to choose one of those 3 choices as your priority for financial performance. We'll give you a few seconds to respond, and then we'll see where our audience is at in terms of this whole issue of financial performance. And then I'll get our speakers to kind of weigh in and see what they think of the as well.
I'm antsy with anticipation, Dr. Timme.
I'm sure you are.
I don't know where that's going to go. So it's going to change all the slides. We'll see.
Okay, so here we go. Well then, leading off at 52%, Expanding profit margin is our audience's area of financial performance they're
Good.
most focusing on improving over the next 12 months. That's followed at 24%, a tie between the remaining two, accelerating revenue growth and improving asset utilization, both at 24%. Gentlemen, you have any, how does that meet your expectations?
What do you think, Dr. Timmy?
Yeah, so no, it's very consistent with what's happening. I bet if we had asked this pre-COVID or pre-quote recession, it would have been grow, and
Sure.
figure out your path to profitability later. Now what you're seeing is a lot of companies, venture capitalist-backed companies are saying, wait, we need to see this path to profitability a lot faster. We still want growth, but you got to show us that this is a viable business. And this is happening for both startup companies. We are very fortunate to work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and you can just read it. So that's not too surprising. How about you, Dave?
I think we see this with all of our operators in today's financial climate. And I think that what's really challenging is you have supply chain leaders, a lot of you that are on the call, that are experts in global supply chain, delivering product, driving revenue. But the financial acumen is we found that there continues to be a gap between what the CFO is asking or the board and where supply chain is. And so you never want to start a talk off with saying, I told you so. But Dr. Timmy, I told you it would be margin expansion. So I want to bet and, excited to really dive in here and talk a lot about how can we help you all do all three of these, but we'll really hone in on margin expansion for you and hopefully give you some tools to dive into.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Dave, which leads me to very naturally to ask a question of you, Dave. And that is that according to PitchBook, now investors, both public and private, are concerned about not seeing portfolio companies on a path to profitability. How does this pressure translate into your supply chain strategy, balancing profitability and growth?
Yeah, I think that this image probably caught a lot of the news here in the web when you have Jensen, co-founder, CEO of NVIDIA, and you have 7 different GPRs, general purpose robots, that are on there. Apptronics is the second one on the left. And for those of you that don't know Apptronics, they're reshaping the way that we live. Their mission is to leverage robotics to improve the universal quality of life. They've built this humanoid that's just fantastic. But this question that you ask, around how do I balance the pressures of growth with profitability? Every single one of these GPRs on here are dealing with that today. And so what we want to talk a little bit about is how do I do this as a supply chain leader? Because you have 2 things. I got to get to revenue, have to actually ship my product, but how do I do it with margin expansion? And the tool that we always tell leaders to think about is you need a 5-year horizon on this. You need to be able to say, what are your COGS today? And how is that going to progress over time? Both as volumes go up, your fixed costs maybe go down, or as a percentage of your overall revenue, they go down. When are you going to invest at each of these points? But I think it's important to set expectations with your board, your CFO, whoever those financial leaders are, to what your margin structure is. Because the reality is, the operating pressures that you have as a supply chain leader are a challenge in themselves. Dr. Timmy can tell you all the time here, and finance will never go away to say more margin, more margin, more margin.
Well, actually, that leads me to wonder, direct this to you, Stephen, what are maybe some of the hidden financial risks that supply chain professionals might not have visibility into as they undertake these efforts?
Yeah, great question, Bob. And so here's the challenge, right? I'm a supply chain leader. I've got my budget. I may have a little bit of a P&L, but I'm utilizing all these assets. I've got the manufacturing assets. I've got the distribution assets. I got the inventory assets. And what happens is that, and I think a lot of this is on us finance types, we don't help people understand, that $1 million piece of equipment we got, maybe we paid cash for it, but there's an expected return on that. Our investors have said, okay, now just own it. Don't forget about it. And the capital cost on a pre-tax basis, and I'm not going to get all this detail, is somewhere between 20 to 25% a year. So that $1 million asset is costing you $250,000 a year. And that, for the most part, does not show up on supply chain professionals' evaluation. So us finance type have invested all this money. We're responsible to talk to investors, yet we're not helping. We're really not helping our supply chain friends be conscious of the fact, like, do I really need that extra 10 days in inventory? Do we really need to spend 2 million? Do we need to spend the million at all? And that's why as a finance type, that's one of the things that we like about digital manufacturing partnerships. It makes everything a variable cost. It's real easy for our supply chain professionals to say, oh, it's costing me this. There is no, unused assets. And as finance types can make better decisions around, is this thing making money or not? So hidden cost drives us finance people crazy.
This will be a big theme for today, Bob, as we talk about fixed versus variable costs. And in supply chain, you really need to consider this. We'll talk about inventory, a bunch of these things, but I think you're spot on. And Dr. Timmy, I love that you're talking us finance folks. So we'll keep putting him in a box, I think, and help balance here.
Well, Finlistic stands for financial linguistics, and our job is to help our non-finance friends speak our language. Because guess what? Us finance types, we're never going to speak yours.
Okay. Well, we'll sharpen both edges of the sword. So,
well, it is great that you're addressing these issues, the financial issues and underlying concerns at all, because so much of that seemed, you showed those robots on stage, those nice shiny things that are not the solution to the problem without these considerations that you guys are outlining for us today. We hear too much about so-called robot graveyards on the yards outside warehouses, the stuff that was acquired and not utilized properly because of the lack of this type of insight that you guys are bringing to us today. So Dave, I'm just wondering, at Fiftive, you work with a wide range of customers who are operating in competitive markets to bring new manufacturing innovations to market. What has shifted from your perspective in terms of what manufacturing companies need in this economic environment? And how do you see digital manufacturing as a solution?
Yeah, I think that I have to start this off with saying, for all of you listening to this live or recorded, you might have the hardest job in business today. I think that supply chain leaders, the amount of empathy I have to be an operations leader in supply chain logistics doing this work, it's probably the hardest job. And what's happened is, imagine you're Rebecca, head of supply chain here, building this GPR, the robot that you see on screen, a general purpose robot. All those joints, actuators, motors, wiring harnesses, you have to build a supply chain to do all of this. And when I say build, you have to finance it as well. So it's not just Rebecca that has to do this, but it's the whole organization. It's engineering, it's finance, it's supply chain. It's really a collaborative effort. And I think what's changed, Bob, which we've talked a lot about with Supply Chain Brain, is that in the last 5 years, supply chain's gone from a functional issue, something that we talk about in operations, to a board level, or let's just start with a C-level issue. CEOs are talking about supply chain risk with their CFOs here, to a board level issue that boards are now, before they invest money in, they're saying, hey, what's my risk in this? Actually, all the way to consumer level. I think consumers, I get on a train in New York City and supply chain is something you can talk about with the person next to you. That never happened 5 years ago. And so I think what's changed in this, and for companies like Apptronics that are building these new, you have large geopolitical risk. We're all dealing with it today. Oops, I get a thumbs up. You also have regional, regional demands that we see across the board that, what's my culture in India? And if I'm going to source from India and Vietnam, and then I'm going to land it in Mexico and finally ship off to the UK, that's a really complex environment to do business in today's macro economy. And so I think that the benefits of digital, you see this on the screen, but these are some of the questions that we hear from customers. I hear 3 things. The first is, most supply chain leaders come to us and saying, I have a lot of pressure to expand my gross margins. That was the number one thing from folks today. The second thing is, I have to do more with less. Finance folks like Dr. Timmy are saying, I'm going to take your budget from last year and I'm going to decrease it, but we're going to do a 20% increase in the product that we're going to ship this year, and you have to do it with less heads. So supply chain leaders are saying, how do I do more with less? How do I leverage, my partners to have less fixed costs? So that's the second problem. And then the third is all around lead time. We've never seen more pressure on supply chain teams to drive revenue, because ultimately you might have a contract that you've made with your end customer. But if I'm not shipping those goods, I'm not generating revenue. And so there's a tremendous amount of pressure, especially in heavy NPI, new product introduction organizations, to really ship these products. So the questions you see buzzing around here of how can digital manufacturing help? We can help with the acceleration, cost reduction, productivity of your team. There's really a lot of ways that we're going to dive into the webinar today. But I want you to think about those three core problems. If you're experiencing 1, 2, 3 of them, you're not alone. We have a lot of empathy for supply chain leaders in today's market.
Well, those 5 benefits look great on paper, Dave, but it all comes down to calculating the actual value for your business. So I'm going to ask Dr. Timmy.
Okay, we'll get into specifics then, Bob. Okay, we'll dive into details.
Okay, let's do that.
Hey, I want to, Dave, I want to build on what you said about our supply chain friends going from the back room to the boardroom. And this was, I don't know, 5+, it was pre-pandemic. And I was fortunate enough, I was given a presentation to a group of a bunch of mainly Fortune 500 VPs of supply chain and others. And so I was talking about the importance of supply chain, how it really is a competitive advantage. It can, just do all kinds of great things for return on capital. And I won't tell you the company. With the one guy comes up and says, Stephen, I wish I believed all that, but guess what? We're the Rodney Dangerfield of the business world. We get no respect. And I'm like, what? Anyway, so hey, now there's more enlightened companies. Now it's time to go to your CFOs and say, here's how we can bring in even more value. So I'm using some industry averages around those 5 areas that Dave talked about. So when we talk about, NPI, and these are based upon conservative guesstimates based upon what Fiftive has achieved. We're just using that as the case study. So I have 100 million in revenues, and it says, okay, X% of my revenues each year come from new products. Well, what if I improve that 10%, which can be demonstrated? That's 1.3 million. Then we get into BOM cost. As you would expect, that's one of the largest. And it says, well, here's what the average BOM cost is in this industry, a lot of the industries that you all are in. A 5% improvement just in the BOM, not overall cost of goods sold, would be almost $2 million. And then we look at internal procurement. It's a small percentage typically of revenues, but it says a 10% would be worth 23,000. But think about my friends out there in startup companies. Do you have your very valuable engineers messing around with supply chain procurement?
Definitely.
I mean, there's other. Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just saying, definitely. They definitely do.
Oh, yeah. So so this is way understated because this is just sort of the financial part. Well, think about that individual who was innovating with new products. What if they were finding ways to, reduce the overall cost of the product? Then inventory. Oh, well, you guys know that us finance type, we hate inventory. We call it trapped cash. So what this is saying, a 10% improvement, again, we're using industry averages. This can also be applied to your company. Love to do that. That's almost 700K. And then CapEx. Oh my gosh, CapEx. We hate CapEx. Not that we're cheap. It's just because we're cheap. But anyway, so what this says, a 10% improvement using some industry averages would be, again, around 700,000. So think about, maybe we're not going to do all of these. You're just going to do some, but be able to go to your CFO and say, hey, you've asked me to do this. Here's a way I think that we can get there. And by the way, you can take that cash and put it back into innovation or whatever you might want to do. So Dave, you want to add anything to this?
I think 2 things here. The first thing I would add is I founded Fiftive on the premise of this almost 10 years ago. I was that engineer building infotainment systems, dashboards of cars at Ford. And I'm a smart guy. They're paying me a great salary, and I'm sourcing parts. I'm much better at thermodynamics, much better at fluids, much better at doing, full analysis on cars and interaction models. And I'm sitting there sourcing parts and talking to suppliers. So that G&A, from a personal experience, I couldn't agree more. Then over the 10-year journey, what we've seen is it's really hard to articulate the financial benefit of these things. Every leader knows this. It's kind of like quality. Quality is really hard to define, but we all know what great quality is. Same thing here. Your CFO is telling you save money, but this framework, NPI acceleration, BOM cost reduction, internal procurement, inventory, and CapEx, this is the structure I want everyone to be writing down in your notebooks right now for how you can go back to the finance types to really build a financial argument. So we'll dive into these, but I think you're spot on here, Dr. Timmy.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. A lot of times, because what we do at Finlistics, we help people show financial benefit. All right. And a lot of times, our friends in supply chain, they've got the great ideas. They just don't know how to articulate the value. And hence they get frustrated. Like, well, I know this is a good idea. I just don't know how much it's going to save us or how much it's going to benefit. So there's a framework for doing that. It's really not that hard. Obviously, you got to be conservative, but yeah, us finance folks, we don't want to hear about some hypothetical soft benefits. We need the hard numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But what about the percentages? Where are they coming from? Are these just examples of possible directives from the C-suite as to how much you need to cut these various areas? Or are these industry averages saying that this is 10, 5, 10, 10, and 10 are typical cuts that are being proposed?
Good question, Bob. So what we've got are industry averages. So, the BOM cost are X% of cost of goods sold. And then by looking at different case studies with Fiftive, where they've been able to reduce it by 5 to 10 or 10 to 20, whatever, we just put in some fact-based, case study-based, let me restate that, case study-based benefits. So these are for illustrative purposes, but they just weren't pulled out of the air.
Right.
They're actually based upon real-world case studies.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Okay. Hey, let's do another audience poll. Let's ask the audience another question here.
This should be a good one.
Yeah, let's bring up that slide. Okay, folks, here's your question. If you could free up 10% of your existing budget, how would you invest that cash? Here are your 4 choices. More resources for supply chain operations, funding to accelerate growth, such as in sales and marketing, R&D to launch new products, or dividends back to employees and or shareholders. This could be an interesting, if not controversial.
This should be good.
I'm going double or nothing, Dr. Timmy, on my bet here. So we'll see what the results.
Don't say anything yet, Dave. We don't want to influence our audience.
Don't want to lead the witness.
Boring.
10% of your budget. How would you invest the cash if you suddenly had this free money in your lap? Okay, here comes the results.
What do we have?
All right, we have 2 tying for 32%. More resources for supply chain operations and funding to accelerate growth, such as sales and marketing, followed by 19% for dividends back to employees and or shareholders. I won't comment on that one. And 16% on R&D to launch new products. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that it's more of what we've been talking about. You have to do more with less. So every supply chain leader here wants to have more resources, because you know that a little bit of investment in supply chain is going to expand your gross margins, get you to market faster, all these things. So the 1 and 2 don't surprise me at all. I'll pause there. Dr. Timmy, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think when I see the resource for supply chain, I'm thinking more in terms of, okay, if I had that money to invest in, some type of new technologies, that's going to give me greater inventory visibility, as an example, all those things that are out there that people are leveraging to better manage their supply chain. Yet what you're finding is a lot of companies are saying, no, I'm not spending any money. So, and then accelerate growth, especially if you're kind of a startup. I mean, growth is fun. I'm kind of surprised about giving any money back. To employees. I missed that part. Employees and or shareholders. I was just seeing the
come on. You don't want to be Oprah, and you get a dividend. You get a dividend.
A robot for everybody.
That'd be great.
Under your seats. Yeah. No, that's why I said I didn't want to comment on that one. But then the R&D, there's some appetite for that.
Yeah, I think across the board. So I think it's a good pulse, and will really help focus on how you can get more money into growth, in supply chain. So that helps us as presenters here. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Let's talk about more about digital manufacturing benefits and NPI, or new product introduction acceleration. So Dave, let's dive deeper into each of these areas of opportunity and what each one looks in practice. Tell me about NPI, or new product introduction, some of the challenges you're seeing supply chain leaders facing, and how digital manufacturing, of course, is making an impact.
This is probably my favorite question to do when I'm in a live audience, because the question I always ask, how many supply chain leaders have had an engineer bring you the supplier that built their prototype and said, do production here. And like everybody raises their hand. I'm like, what's your largest nightmare? An engineer bringing that supplier to me saying, I need to do it. Because the reality is the supply base that builds your first product often is not the one that can scale up and ramp your product. And so the amount of inefficiency that happens here, I like to equate it to software. Like imagine if you built your software on one stack of technology or on, internal premise servers. And then when you launched it, you moved it to AWS. And then when you launched it, you had to move it to Azure. And you constantly had to keep changing. Or to the finance folks, like imagine you had to switch from Excel and then you had to go use like Pages or something and then Google Sheets and like, all your formulas. That's the reality for NPI, is that your supply base doesn't move with you as you go through the various stages of new product introduction. And so I think that the core thing we set out to solve in building this digital manufacturing company is we wanted to help take companies from each stage of development. We wanted to get from an early prototype building one to your ramp phase where you're really making money at margin targets, at shipping these things to product, revenue generating product. And what this means is a lot of times we are the glue between engineering and supply chain. My background is I'm a mechanical engineer. That's what I did, starting my career off. But as I said, I've spent actually most of my time in supply chain since running and starting Fiftive. And so we see a lot of the technology we built as being this glue here. And we believe this is a core gap in the market. When we talk about our mission to simplify sourcing, when we worked with Rebecca on this, it was great because we already knew their entire engineering team. And we already knew how the parts were made, the tolerances, the specific finishing. You can look at all these parts on your screen. So when we first met Rebecca, we said, Rebecca, we have a solution for you. And that's much different than Rebecca having to go out and getting a bid, doing an RFQ process, doing cost down exercises. It's about knowing the product that you build. And so I would ask for the supply chain leaders here, how equipped is your supply chain for bridging this gap from prototype or R&D into production through these NPI phases? And that's a key question to ask.
Yeah, it's a great point to make. In traditional organizations that are heavily siloed in their functions, often supply chain isn't even brought to the table when at the design stage. And they get it dumped in their laps, and it's like all of a sudden, guys, this isn't going to work on a supply chain level. So it's great that you talk about that glue. Thanks very much, Dave. Stephen, did you have any comment on that particular one, or should we move on?
Yeah, no, you see this all the time, is that you just don't have all the different stakeholders, which supply chain certainly is, in on, well, how could we, and I would challenge my friends out there, how often have you been brought to the table and say, okay, we're going to launch this new product. What ideas do you all have to help us, improve time to market, as an example? And so they're, it's like, okay, we're going to launch this. Oh, we are? News to me. So yeah, they're just, I'm stating the obvious. It just has to be much greater collaboration. I think that's one of the things that, COVID really forced these companies to do. Like, oh my God, supply chain is so friggin' important. They need to be in on these things.
So the takeaway here really is, if you're a supply chain leader, what you need to do is help bring the productivity gains to your CFO by doing NPI faster. And if you can show that the transition from an R&D to an NPI, launching your product, is 10% productivity gains, that's where you're going to see millions of dollars of benefits. And too often we see folks over-optimizing for cost, say in the NPI. This is really about time to market and productivity of your engineering team. Let your engineers do R&D and make a great product. Supply chain focus on setting up the right partners that can bridge this ramp period, and then build a financial argument to help bring it to your financial leaders.
Let's talk more about that financial argument, specifically cutting costs. Dave, when it comes to reducing part and material costs, what are the major levers that you recommend supply chain leaders focus on, and how can a digital manufacturing partner help here?
Yeah, I love this image because, again, my empathy for Rebecca. Can you imagine having to source all of these things? And then not only source them, but the financial types like Dr. Timmy are saying, get cost out, get cost out, get cost out. You're just trying to ship is all you're trying to do. And so I want to give 4 key tactics that as a supply chain leader, you can go back to engineering or leverage your partners, whether it's a company like Fiftive or it's a more traditional supply chain to do. The first thing in your strategy for BOM cost reduction should always be part elimination. And I see people skip this step all the time. I see them try to change a material or adjust, volumes up, or try to say, hey, when I'm at these volumes 5 years, give me some discounts now. The best way to reduce BOM costs is part elimination. And your partners should help you work with engineering to do this. The second major thing that you can do is look at a global or a regional supply chain that helps get you best cost. And so a lot of times what I've seen is that folks are just struggling to get that first product out the market, and they're still assembling at $75 an hour in a high metropolitan area in the US. And they're not thinking about what's the best cost for assembly. Or they are investing in fixed assets to do this when really, you can do it in a much better cost region. So global supply chains here is another big way to help on cost reduction. The third thing is all around DFM, design for manufacturing. So you see this in materials, tolerances, features. A lot of times, especially in NPI settings, what we see is that engineers have overspec'd their product. And they've overspec'd it because they're worried that it won't work at scale. And so then those specifications never actually get adjusted as you ramp and see the quality or the yield on your manufacturing line. And so I push a lot of supply chain leaders to say, hey, are your supply chain partners today, are they helping you optimize for material, tolerance, and features? And you can remove a significant amount of cost by relaxing these. And then the fourth one, which maybe is obvious, but I'll add here, is all around manufacturing process optimization. We see a lot of design engineers, a lot of supply chain teams. It's like a toolbox in your garage. And if that toolbox has all these tools you've used before, that's what I'm going to use for this new product. In an NPI setting, every product is unique. And so you need to look at, am I casting things when, I can look at a different process? Am I doing things in, machining when I actually could switch to a plastic and injection mold this? As an engineer at Ford, we saw this all the time. We took a lot of parts that were metal traditionally, and we moved them to injection molding, which has a much lower cost at same structural strength and yields on it. And so manufacturing process optimization is another place that hopefully your partners are helping you with. And so this is more tactical, but I'll move it to Dr. Timmy, maybe to add some of the financial benefits or what you think here, Dr. Timmy.
Yeah, and we saw that this was one of the largest ones, and I agree. The things being over-engineered as an example. I like playing with this stuff, and I'm not making fun of anyone. It was just, do what you do best, and then bring in the experts to say, okay, here's how we've seen others do this in your industry, and just I'm just focus on what you do best, but bring in people that have done this many different times. But it's hard. I mean, change is hard when you're saying, okay, use injection molding. Are you kidding me? Yeah, yes. And let me show you the financial benefits.
But is the best cost for prototype and NPI development necessarily the best cost when you're scaling up production from a global versus regional sourcing strategy? Does that change?
Well, I mean, part of it is we're trying to optimize all cost, all profitability. And that's the challenge is sometimes, and us finance folks are very guilty of this, is we just zero on one aspect of the business, like the BOM costs. Get the BOM cost down, get the BOM cost down, right? But we have to balance that with what if you could get to market 3 months faster, as an example? What if we had our very valuable engineers working on the next product? So one of the things I always caution people against is do not focus on just one piece. Now, when I'm in charge of that piece, it's like, but that's what's on my scorecard, dude. I mean, that's what I have to do. But yeah, it has to be an overall optimization, not just focus on one piece.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk more, though, about productivity. You brought it up, but I want to drill down a little bit more. This question would be for Dr. Timmy. As companies are faced with all these operational challenges, how should supply chain leaders think about the productivity of their teams In other words, about doing more with less. How does digital manufacturing extend a team's productivity?
Yeah, well, it gets back to what I said earlier, that it's about what is it you do best. And I like to give, my friends out there, an analogy. So you look at business process outsourcing, whether it be around HR, whether it be around procurement, whether it be around whatever it is around. One of there's some financial benefits to that, but the other part is, wow, I can now have my people focused on where they add the greatest value in the company. I mean, cloud is another great example, right? So is your IT team really best at managing data centers, or are they adding much more value, getting new solutions out there faster that's going to help grow the business, better manage expenses, et cetera? And this is really no different than that. I mean, the way that this is set up around digital is that, look, I can really focus on what I do best, be more productive, help grow the business faster, expand margins. And this isn't some hypothetical. I mean, there's case studies demonstrating this.
Well, I mean, Dave, isn't the whole value proposition of digital manufacturing productivity, greater productivity?
I think it's all about productivity. And what I saw coming into this over 10 years ago when we started is the whole industry runs on a Microsoft suite. It's SharePoint, it's Excel, it's email, it's PowerPoint. Those are tools from the 90s. Like, we're building AI that's smarter than like I am. And today we're still using tools, for this productivity gain. And so, what we tell a lot of companies, if you're not using the best in class software technology to manage this for you, it's not just about the outsourcing effort. And I'm like fully on board with what Dr. Timmy is saying. It's also about our using the best tools. Because if you're not, your competition is. And so I think that this went from a moment of should we adopt it to what the last few years is like, you have to adopt this if you want to stay current. And so I think time and time again, what we see with productivity gains is that folks aren't looking to optimize the workforce that they have. What did you hire them to do? What are they world class at? And they still feel that they need to hire teams in global regions, that they have to, push through everything in standardized tools. And I can tell you the best teams are leveraging incredible technology that's AI backed and are leveraging best in class, boots on the ground in global regions rather than building it themselves.
Okay, let's talk about that thing that everybody hates. Dr. Timmy, what is the financial point of view on held inventory, and how do you think about inventory costs flowing through a P&L? What is the solution?
Yeah. So here, inventory is a tricky question, right? It's a trade-off between three things. How much do I want to invest? What's product availability, right? So I'm balancing sales. And then obviously we need to replace things, right? So what is service levels? And what you find, at least that's been my experience, if you look at a lot of, like the companies that are out there today, the industry average holding inventories is over 100 days, okay? And so I mentioned this earlier, we view inventory as trapped cash. There's got to be some better way of managing inventories, which a digital manufacturer helps you with that, right? You don't have to have this huge pile of parts waiting around. So it gives you greater flexibility. And think about that. And this isn't just me being a cheap finance type. It's, well, kind of. Anyway, so if you think about, if I can better manage inventory without messing up those other two, my sales and my service, that frees up cash to put somewhere else, somewhere more productive. I keep getting back to what are you best at? Best at managing inventory? Really? So it allows you to free up cash to put back in the company. The inventory has a huge carrying cost, which most people don't even think about because they don't get a capital charge. But inventory costs you about 20% all in. This is your non-capital and capital charge, all in about 20% a year. So $1 million worth of inventory, you're spending $200,000, whether you recognize that or not. So what it's going to do is help expand margins, which you all said was your number one, goal. And what it also does, it increases the return on capital that's invested. So think about it. If you're pre-IPO, as an example, or you're still trying to attract funds, better managing inventory, and it's not the only thing, but better managing inventory makes you a much more attractive company to invest in. I'm not saying go overboard, because I've got plenty of examples of people have cut inventories and lost sales. but there's almost always, I've never seen a company yet that can't better optimize holding inventory.
Well, it's a good answer to those. Go on. I'm sorry, Dave.
We have a great example of this with Honeywell, where they had a product that was an APU, an auxiliary power unit, for say Chinook helicopters and a lot of these other ones. And their supply chain was running at 7 months to produce MRO, maintenance, repair, overhaul. So this is the service side. 7 months to have replacement parts. It was a really simple calculation. We used this tool for it, where you plugged in what was the revenue hit for Honeywell as a result of waiting 7 months to service these versus if you move to a digital setting where you make it just in time. And so when you look at the cash cycles that are freed up, that's one. But the second thing is actually the ability to generate revenues on inventories much faster if you have a more agile supply chain here. And so I love the trapped cash. Like when Dr. Timmy, taught me on this, I always thought about inventory. I thought about free cash flow. I thought about warehousing, these things. And now in my mind, when someone is talking to me about inventory, I have this image of like cash in a safe that's trapped with all these parts on top. And so I can't get this image out of my mind, but it really helps me better articulate to financial folks of what the benefits are here. And so help translate this from, it's obvious, you know that you can produce a better part, you can do just in time. But I think this framework that Dr. Timmy's talking about is really fantastic. Thank you for teaching me too, Dr. Timmy.
Okay, Dave. So I want to ask you though, one of the main pillars of digital manufacturing is that it leverages digital infrastructure to network existing manufacturing assets around the world.
Yeah.
Tell me about how this works and the impact it can have for companies to reduce their capital expenditures. Which
I want you to imagine a much younger Dave with no gray hair or kids, and I'm raising the first set of venture capital dollars, saying we're going to build a Fortune 500 supply chain. This is 10 years ago, and I'm not going to own a single machine. Sorry, you're going to be a supply chain. You're going to build all these, and you're not going to own any machines. And we said, yes. The reason why is that as soon as you own a factory and you own all of this CapEx, I am biased. I am biased to the way your product gets built. And so typically the way that this works is that when you go to a manufacturer, when you're in supply chain, I'm going to a supplier and doing an RFQ, they're going to tell you the way they would produce it, with the warehousing that they have, with the 3PL, the third-party logistics, with the machines that they have on hand. And they're going to build a solution for you that's based upon their own assets. When you work with a digital manufacturing company, I am a partner for you. What I am doing is that I'm saying, what is the best way with a magic wand to actually make this product, say that robot? And we can then say, how am I going to optimize a global supply chain for that product specifically? Can we do just-in-time manufacturing? Can we have flexibility in injection molding, where most people think you have to be building tens of thousands of units for it to make sense? We have case studies where people are building no more than 200 parts in injection molding, and the ROI happens in month two. Month two. So we're changing this concept here of warehousing. We're changing the concept of assets that you own to say, hey, we can free up capital expenditures for you to spend money in other places. And as an asset zero business, what Fiftive Supply Chain Solution does, we can help you leverage a global supply chain rather than just a discrete set of machines that maybe your existing solution does today. And so the result of this is we can reduce your footprint. So what you actually have to invest in your factories. We can reduce your equipment that you have to buy and own as well. And we have case studies. I talked about the Honeywell one, but we have case studies where we are taking equipment that does, say, medical grade applications, and we're producing high cosmetic standards in consumer because it requires it. So rather than having to invest in new assets, we're using existing assets there. And what you see in the financial side is that if you can free up capital expenditures, CapEx, you can really put a lot of money back into the business to do the two things people wanted, either to add more resources to supply chain or to expand your time to market, your sales and marketing here.
Okay, Dave, thank you very much for that. And thank you also to Dr. Timmy for your presentation. I do want to bring the audience in the time we have remaining, because we do have some audience questions to be asked. And so let me start with this, and I'll direct this to whoever wants to take this first one. What are your recommendations for cost reduction for small companies versus large enterprises? Maybe Dr. Timmy, want to start on that one?
Yeah, I've never met a company, and now most small companies I've seen are running pretty lean because you don't have the option of, oh, let's go buy a corporate jet, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we're a small company, and we're always finding ways to say, well, here's how we can leverage technology to do this better, right? So I mean, just very, very simple stuff. For example, like we do a lot of product development, a lot of code, those kind of things. So like in this example, no code is saving us all kinds of money, and then outsourcing parts that we don't have the skills to do, or I don't want to develop skills to do. So there's always ways that you can find, say, okay, what do I do best? Not what you like best necessarily. What do you do best? And it's, sometimes it's tough. Dave?
From my personal experience, I did a couple startups coming out of Stanford, and I thought that as I moved into Ford, I was so resource constrained when I was doing these startups, and now I'm moving into Ford, I'm going to have all the resources. It's just not true. I think what Dr. Timmy says is that no matter where you are, you're always running lean. Let's be honest, supply chain's still a cost center. And until you're saving money back in, it's really still viewed that way. And so I think my recommendations, if you're a small company, be lean, be scrappy, get to market, focus on a cost down over time. If you're in a large company, a lot of times you might not be the flagship product, so you don't have the resources because you're dealing with a secondary product or you're dealing with revisions. And in that case, partner is almost always the best way. And so make your life easy, partnering, with best-in-class people that do this for a living, I think is the best. And we have cases from the Aptronics that are, small developing companies all the way up to the Honeywells of the world.
Lean and scrappy is good for everybody, at least in theory. Okay, here's another question. What is the difference? I guess this one for Dave. What is the difference between a contract manufacturer and a digital manufacturing company like Fiftive?
That's a great question. Not to be overly simplistic, but if I had to think about contract manufacturer, I'd define it as it's an asset heavy business that you are generally selecting that CM based upon reputation and similar products. So most supply chain leaders say, well, I never got fired for choosing Jabil or Flex, right? Or because, this CM here does a product like mine, they can do mine. I think this is a big trap. And so I think the asset heavy nature really is a challenge with a lot of CMs. The digital manufacturer, we're a partner, a strategic partner for businesses. Our customers tell us that we're like a bolt-on supply chain team, and that they get to plug and play to a supply chain that Honeywell's using, and that as a small company, I get to leverage that. So I think that for companies that need this, world-class global solution, it's where digital can help them with speed is a really big benefit of that, versus CMs are probably more reputation and asset-based due to their business models.
Thanks. So this questioner wants to know, what is the right time to partner with a digital manufacturing company in the NPI or new product introduction lifecycle?
Never too early. I'll but never too early. I'd say the benefit, back to what we were talking about, is if you can get involved in that first prototyping cycle with a digital manufacturing company, us as a group of people are going to help take you through that NPI cycle. And so the sooner that you engage building 1, 2, 10, 100, 50, whatever those numbers are, it's never too early. We typically, the way that Fiftive partners, we come in and the whole engineering team is screaming our praises or saying, hey, we had some really hard parts and Fiftive came through on it. And that's the introduction to supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, think about, Dave, I'm going to do it on my own, how many change orders there are over that period versus working with a digital manufacturer that has the expertise. And so, I mean, that alone is going to cut out cost as well as get you there faster.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I direct this to Dave, since you have done a number of startups, so you probably have a good perspective on this. This questioner is saying, people looking for immediate profitability, or at least a path to profitability. That's one thing. But what's
Hmm.
happening more with venture-backed companies, which may be in a different kind of situation? Can you, give us a
I think what's
comparison there?
happening, I think what's happening in the market, because we work with so many venture-backed folks, call this B, C, kind of pre-IPO, is that the venture capital community has become numb to path to profitability. So every single company has a slide that says, here's my margin expansion, here's how I get to profitability. But what's really lacking in this is the data to show this. And so, where we get brought in time and time again during a diligence phase of a new venture round is the supply chain ready to achieve these goals? And so if you're a supply chain leader and your company is going through a funding cycle, whether that's an IPO or it's a venture round in this, you have to partner with your founders, you have to partner with finance to show not only the path to profitability, but the plan behind it. Because I can tell you there's never been more scrutiny in these types of companies today. And showing a plan, that's what's going to make you stand out here. I don't know, Dr. Tim, if you'd add
Yeah.
anything onto that.
Yeah, we discussed this a little bit. I mean, 5 years ago, here's $100 million, grow as fast as you can, prove that product has demand or service has demand. And then, you look at what's happening to these companies, all of a sudden, they're letting people go. We track a lot of this stuff on LinkedIn and that, and they're cutting back and they're being told, hey, show a profit. And yeah, we still want you to grow. We know it's not going to be as fast, but you've got to show us this nice slide, the profitability path to profitability. As you said, Dave, what's the plan to profitability? So it's shaking things up.
I like it. Plan to profitability and trapped cash. Those are good.
Okay. The question says, for startups, is it advisable to take the contract manufacturer route versus digital manufacturing?
Oof, that's a great one. I think what happens a lot of times is that folks choose a contract manufacturer based upon reputation or like products like we talked about. But you're just a small fish in a big pond. And so for a lot of startups, I really would advise, until you're at a real heavy maturity state, let's call it generating 50, 75, $100 million in revenue, growing at 30, 40% year over year, a CM is really gonna not move at the same speed. So you're gonna have an impedance mismatch. You're gonna be moving like this, and the CM is just like this. And so it's just like, it's a real hard cycle. So I think digital is a great way to bridge the gap here. And sometimes it's a partnership. I can tell you actually a lot. It's a digital manufacturing company working with a CM, working with that startup. That's not uncommon as well. We do that a lot.
Great. Well, gentlemen, this has been a great discussion, a great presentation, but unfortunately, I have to tell you, we are just about out of time.
Oh, we were just getting started, though.
I know. I hate it.
I'm a college professor. I could go on for another 3 or 4 hours. Dave,
Right.
how about you?
All right, guys, listen up. This is the final question. I'm going to pose it to each of you, starting with Dr. Timmy. How do I take all this information I've learned in the last hour and begin to turn it into action? What is the first step?
Yeah, so think about those 5 areas, the NPI, BOM cost, CapEx, inventory, et cetera. So pick the one that you're saying, okay, where do we maybe have a problem? What's your baseline? You have to know the baseline. If you don't, you can work with the finance folks. And then think about some of those percentage improvements that we showed for illustrative purposes on a conservative side, what they weren't made up, and say, well, what would that mean to me financially, right? And then also think about, what do we do best? Are our engineers, working on procurement? Are we the ones that really should be designing the parts, equipment, and utilizing that? So what are we trying to get done? We're trying to expand margins. Okay, what are we really good at? Pick a couple of those areas. You don't need all 5. Well, what would it be worth to us if we got, for example, those percentages that we showed? So now you at least have an idea. Is this tangible or not? And then work with your finance group. More and more finance people are getting away from just the finance and accounting, the reporting. That's still a big part. But more and more are saying, hey, you finance people, you like numbers. You need to be working with the business unit to help this company be a lot stronger. It's called the changing role of the CFO. There's another one, Dave.
Yeah. I think three things for me, Bob. I would ask everyone to take away, how can you expand your gross margins through BOM cost optimization? We gave you 5 points on that. I would say, how can you help improve your team's productivity? Primarily through NPI development and focus on speed in that. And then the third thing I would say is, how can you reduce fixed costs across your org and be maniacal about that? I think if you can do those three things, BOM cost optimization, productivity through speed, and fixed cost, avoidance, you're on a great path to really being a part of a world-renowned company. So
those are some great takeaways. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Timmy and Dave Evans. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I do want to bring our audience's attention to a couple of bonus offerings here from Fiftive. Starting with a QR code there that you can scan to get a free digital manufacturing calculator, and also offering an ebook, which is accessible by a URL, as is the calculator that will be provided to all attendees of this webinar at the end. So look for that. So both of these extras will be of extreme value to you, as was this entire presentation. So again, Dr. Stephen Timmy of Finlistics and Dave Evans of Fiftive, thank you very much for your time. Audience, thank you for your participation and your great questions. Everybody, have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
great. Thank you so much. Really fun. Thank you.